That Triathlon Show 246. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I interview Marcel Wouda, who is a swim and open water swimming coach from the Netherlands, who has coached and worked with multiple Olympic gold medalists, including the men's gold medalist from Beijing 2008 and both the men's and women's Olympic champions from Rio de Janeiro 2016. We will discuss the training strategies that Marcel uses to prepare his open water swimmers for the demands of that specific type of racing. And he also gives us some advice for regular triathletes who obviously cannot and shouldn't just try to copy what these world-class pure swimmers do, but we will get some advice for our specific situation as well. But before we get into the interview, big thanks to our sponsors. First, we have Precision Hydration that you can find on precisionhydration.com. They create electrolyte products that you can match to how you sweat, meaning that if you are somebody that loses more sodium in your sweat, you can get a stronger electrolyte supplement that contains more sodium. And if you are in the middle or on the low end, then you can choose electrolyte supplements with a sodium concentration accordingly. This is easy because Precision Hydration has created a free online sweat test that is just a quiz that takes a couple of minutes to do, and that will give you a good ballpark estimate for how much sodium you lose in your sweat, and then you can start tailoring your hydration plan based on that information that you'll get. You can get 15% off your order with the promo code ThatTriathlonShow15 on precisionhydration.com. And thank you to Roka that you can find on roka.com. Roka started out as a project to create the fastest possible triathlon wetsuit, and this is something that is still at the core of what Roka do, as we have seen recently with the launch of the new Maverick X2 wetsuit, which I absolutely love. But since then, Roka has come a long way and are now leading manufacturers in product categories such as tri-suits, goggles, eyewear for both sports and for casual day-to-day use, and so on. So there is really a lot to see in Roka, and growth of the company is admirable. And it all comes down to the fact that they really pay attention to all the details and make sure that their products are as good as they can possibly be, trying to raise the bar, so to say. You can get 20% off your Roka order with the promo code that you can get on roka.com/TTS. Now, without any further ado, let's get into the interview with Marcel Wouda. Welcome to That Triathlon Show, Marcel. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm well. I just finished up our workout here in the pool in Eindhoven, and I'm ready for the podcast. I'm excited.
Great. So, what was the session today that you did, or your squad did?
Yeah, we had a few different things going on. We had the open water guys doing about 7K this afternoon. Quite intense, and the pool swimmers, they are I'm bringing them down quite a bit in volume, since we have in 2 weeks time we have a competition going on here. It will be our first official competition, so we're quite excited for that, and I tried to get them in a fairly decent shape. We've worked hard over the last weeks, and even though with all the corona problems in the world, we've managed to keep them in the program. So there were, I think, 2 or 3 weeks without any pool time, but we find lots of other ways to get them engaged. And so we've worked hard since January, and we're excited to bring them down towards this competition. So they have not done so much, but the intensity was quite high.
Right. And what does the season from now on, or seasons until the Olympics next year, look like? What sort of championship races and other races are on the calendar, as it seems at this moment when we're talking late July?
Yeah. Well, I'm running two programs here in Eindhoven, and one is an open water swimming program, and one is a pool swimming program, and they have quite a different periodization. And the pool program has a meet in 2 weeks. Then I give them a week off, and then we start building up towards December, and that is our Olympic qualification. And also our qualification meet for the European Championships that they will be held in Budapest in May 2021. And from there on, we'll focus towards the Olympics. So that's pretty much the road to follow. The open waters, it's a little bit similar. We work towards December because we have decided to do the qualification for the European Championships in Budapest in the pool, since most of the open water swimming competitions that have any good level of athletes are cancelled. We have no real way of testing them if they no real way of selecting them. So we've decided to have some qualification criteria in the pool. So they can qualify for the European Open Water Championships. They are also in Budapest next year in May. And of course, we have the Olympic Championships, but the open water have all the qualification process for that in open water has already been finalized last year at the World Championships in Gwangju. So we have one swimmer going to that event.
All right. And can you give us a little bit more of an introduction to yourself? What is your background? How did you end up in swimming and then in swimming coaching?
Yes, I can. I certainly can. I've been a competitive swimmer for over 20 years. And in 2000, after my third Olympic Games, I decided to retire. And I was an individual medley specialist. So I was a specialist in all the strokes. And my best performances, I think, were winning a bronze medal in the 4x200 freestyle relay with the Dutch team in the Sydney Olympics. And I broke the world record once in the 400 IM. 400 individual medley in the short course. So that was my big highlight as a swimmer. And after that, I was out of the sport for about 2 years, not completely, but not involved as much. And in that 2 years, I discovered that I really had a passion for coaching as well. So I got my coaching degree, my coaching license, and starting in October 2002, I became a swimming coach. And the first 4 years, I was a coach in the national junior team in the Netherlands. And from 2006 up to this day, I've been coaching in Eindhoven in the High Performance Center. And the last 4 years, I've been the head coach of this High Performance Center. So that's pretty much my coaching career. And one of the focus in my programs is one part has always been open water swimming. So I was the coach of Maarten van der Weijden, who won the Olympic gold medal in 2008. And in 2016, I was coaching Ferry Weertman. He was also the Olympic champion in 2016. And I played an important part with the preparation for Sharon van Rouwendaal. And she was also Olympic champion in the 10K with the women in 2016. So we've been quite successful as a country in open water swimming.
Yeah, that's why I contacted you. I wanted to talk with an open water swimming coach, and I started looking at which coaches have had a lot of success recently, and it was pretty easy to find you from that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I want to ask you about the setup you have there with having both the pool swimming squad and the open water squad in Eindhoven. I imagine that now it might look a little bit different because of Corona, but normally, how does it work having these two setups? Are a lot of the sessions or the workouts done together, or is it different the way you described it today? There was a bit of a different workout for the two groups, and also how often do the open water swimmers go and actually swim in the open water rather than in the pool and so on?
We in the past, so leading up to 2016, we had quite a bit of work together, and also up to 2018. But in the last 2 years, we found that the programs are a lot different because of different requirements to the periodization, especially to have them prepared well for the Tokyo Olympic Games. We've started some special projects that are maybe interesting to talk a little bit about later. But so the programs are quite different now. So they train at the same hours, and every now and then we do a workout together. But that's more of a coincidence than that we have planned it. I think I have 2 assistant coaches, and one is fully dedicated also to the open water swimming program. So I work with him a lot. So he does a lot of the workouts at the moment, and I divide my attention between pool swimming and open water swimming. So I mix that up. You also asked me if they swim a lot outdoors. No, they don't. To be honest, I think that most, and that's a little bit how I feel about open water swimming, is that one part of the sport is building a huge aerobic base. And I think you can do that in any sort of water. So you can do that in a pool or in an open water environment. However, I feel that the pool is a lot more controlled, environment. So you have a lot more control about the variables. So you are better as a coach. You're better able to direct their training and their process. So I don't do a lot of open water training. It changes a lot when we have competitions that have special requirements in open water. So for the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio, like 2 years before the race, I've made my plans, and I came across a few key factors that I thought were really important for the performance. And one of that was dealing with the tidal changes. Since Rio has tides, you have to deal with that, and that every different tide has different currents. There was a lot of different possibilities about the height of the waves. So if you have a lot of wind, you have high waves in the Copacabana. So we practiced a lot with the different wave heights. And we also practice a lot in the different temperatures, because the water could range from 18 to 22, 23 degrees. And that's quite a big difference for an athlete. So I indicated those key performance factors, and we built them in our program quite a bit. Well, if you look to Tokyo, then we have a very easy setting at the moment. It might change, but how the situation is right now is that it's really flat, quite warm, and no currents. So that does not require a lot of training in open water. Of course, we do some, but not so much.
Mm. And what does that mean, doing some but not so much? Is it something that you do a couple of times per week? And is that only in the sort of last couple of months before the race, or is it even less or slightly more than that? If you can give a rough indication.
Yeah, I can. It's definitely not a couple times a week. We have indicated a few periods throughout the season where we take them on a camp. For example, in September, or end of August, after we have a week of break, we have a 2-week camp. And then we take them for 2 weeks. We have 80% of the work is done outdoors. So we have planned for 85 kilometers a week. So that means that almost 60 of those kilometers will be done in the lake or in the rivers. So for that, then we have a block with a lot of open water swimming just to keep practicing those open water skills. Then I think in November, we have another block of 3 weeks where we go to a location where we do about, say, 20% of the work outdoors. So 20% of the work is outdoors and 80% is in the pool.
Right. And about the open water skills, am I right in assuming that for most swimmers, they don't really start out thinking they'll be an open water swimmer, but it's something that happens over time as they realize that their real strength is on the endurance side of things, and they have a massive diesel engine, basically. So when somebody makes a transition to open water swimming from focusing on pool swimming, how long does it take them to get used to the specific demands of open water swimming and learning the skills that are required for that? And how do you help them with that? Do they do more open water swimming at the beginning to just gain those skills, or what are the strategies you use?
A lot of questions, but I'll try to start out at the beginning of your questions, and please correct me if I go too far off topic. Your first question is about athletes that at the start of their career, they don't really start with the idea of being an open water swimmer. And I think that is true, especially in this in present time. We see that due to the sport becoming an Olympic sport in 2008, we have seen a lot of development in the sport of open water swimmer. In the beginning, it was pretty much athletes that were not successful in the pool. They made the transition to open water swimming. And what we see now, especially with the men swimming, is that we have extremely talented pool swimmers that are world champion in the pool as well, are also swimming in open water. So we're getting better and better swimmers in the open water races. I think that's a very good development. So that is changing a bit. So that also in our program in the Netherlands, we are also changing the way we look for talent. So right now, in the very young ages, we look for athletes that have a good 200 and 400 meter speed and like the endurance part of the swimming. So when we have those swimmers, we try to slowly get them familiar with the sport of open water swimming. The way I've done it in the past, and still with 2 new boys that we just entered in our program, is that once they are around 17, 18, the end of their junior period, they need some time for the transition to the senior level. There's not many swimmers that make the step from the junior level to the senior level in one season. So what I've done with those athletes is I've decided to sit down with them and say, especially if they are 400 or 1500 meter athletes, say, let's take a year out of your program and focus a bit more on the open water, because we can do a lot of volume in the pool, and it will help your development in the 400 and the 1500 as well. And it will also give you a good goal for this season to focus on. And from there on, we go back to it. If we build that foundation, then we have a good base to build either towards open water or back to the 400 and the 1500 meter in the pool. So that's how I really try to get the swimmers involved in open water swimming. And some of them feel they really love the sport of open water swimming, and some of them still like the pool better. What we do in that year is we pretty much do a lot of volume. I think that an open water swimmer needs to be able to do between 80 and 100 kilometers a week without breaking down too much. So if I get them in the program, our goal is always within a year, they need to be able to do that amount of work. So all our activities and work is focused towards achieving that goal. Besides that, in that year, we put a lot of emphasis on the open water skills. And I think you need to be successful in open water. You need the physiological side of things that needs to be developed, but also the skill side of things. And I think there's a few technical skills, like turning around buoys, swimming in a pack, approaching a finish, approaching a drinking pontoon, learning to read a course in terms of currents during the course, and changing currents during the course, reading. But the other part is more the mental side of the race, because whereas swimming is a very individual sport, you do that in the pool and you have no contact with others. You're completely in charge of your own performance. In open water, it's a contact sport, and other swimmers can have a big influence on your performance, on the outcome of your performance. So I think swimming in the pack, and especially dividing your energy over the 1 hour 50, 2 hour period, that's a very, very mental skill that they need to master, and they need some experience for that. They need to swim a few races in order to do that well.
So it is mostly through races that you try to build that experience and build those skills then, or do you focus additionally on maybe even doing some open water skill work in the pool, or just having more training camps with open water in that first year?
Oh, we do all sorts of things. Currently, we have 5 swimmers in the open water group, and once a week we have them swimming in a pack in the pool, and all different positions. And we film those positions, and we confront them with the choices they make in the changes during the pack. We do a lot of distance on different intervals or on different speeds, swimming speeds. So they really have to be aware of how to divide their energy. It's so easy to create learning experiences during practice. So we create a lot of chances during the week in which we put them in a learning position. Of course, we only have a few moments during a whole season where everything comes together, but that are the World Cups, because most other competitions the level is not high enough. But we have 3 or 4 competitions where everything comes together, and that we have a pack that is of high quality enough so they can really put their skills to the test. But during the normal season, we create. We have all those situations that can occur in the race. We bring them to the practice, either in the pool in situations, or even in the weight room. You can do situations, or on Dryland, or even in open water training.
Yeah, that makes sense. And can you give an example or an overview of what a typical training week might look like for the open water swimmers? And let's say we're not that close to any races, but maybe 3 months out from when you want to peak for a race or something. So still building that base, so to say. And what would a typical training week look like?
Well, maybe it's a good idea or better idea to start out with my vision about how to train for open water swimming, because that will that will help a lot in when I explain how my weeks look like. So I started with Maarten van der Weijden in 2006, and he came to me and he said, I want you to be my open water coach. And I said, well, I don't know anything about open water swimming. He said, true, but you're the only coach in the Netherlands working with 1500 meter swimmers. And I think to be faster in open water, my 1500 meter speed needs to improve. So we started doing that. And after a half year, he was swimming a lot faster in the 1500, but his 10K performance did not change. So at that time, after the World Championships of 2007 in Melbourne, I sat down and started to really think about open water swimming and what it is. And that's when I developed my ideas. And what I think open water swimming is that it's an hour and 50 minutes performance. And if you look at the international results, then all the big meets have always been decided in the last 10 or 15 minutes. So the pack, a group of swimmers start a race, they stay together for an hour and 35 minutes, and then the final of the race starts. So I decided that the easier, the better you get through that first hour and 35 minutes, the more you have left for those last 15 minutes for the final, which is a very easy idea, of course. So what we are trying to do, I found out that the average speed in that first block is about 106 pace per 100 meters. So they go 1 minute 6 seconds for every 100 meter. And in the final, it drops down to maybe 105, 104, and in the last 50 meters, they go even under 30 seconds. So if you look at the energy systems needed for that, then I think the most dominant energy system is the aerobic capacity. So your ability to burn carbohydrates to glycogen and fatty acids in a very efficient way is extremely important for that first hour and a half part of your race. So we do a lot of basic aerobic work just to build that kind of base. And we found that if we get them to the level where they can easily swim that pace, they have a lot of speed left for the last part of the race. So the other side that we do, we try to build a lot of anaerobic capacity. So they really have overspeed. So what the difference is between my program and a lot of other programs is that my program, my swimmers can pace really easy at 105, 106, and then they can turn the engine on and they can do 100 at 55 or 54 seconds. The other programs, those swimmers are really good at pacing at 101 or 102 per 100. And when they put on the engine at the last 100 meters, they drop down to 58. So I create swimmers with a huge speed range, and most other programs create swimmers with a fairly narrow speed range. Having said that, a lot of my work in the beginning of the season, about I think 90%, 95% of the work is done in a very low intensity, aerobically, not so much rest. I think we go about 80, 85 kilometers. And we have about 10 to 12 kilometers in the morning and 7 to 8 kilometers in the afternoon. So in the first part of the season, we do a lot of easy aerobic work, a lot of technique work, because I think that the more energy you save with a better stroke, the more energy you have left at the end of the race to really turn the engine on. And besides that, we do a lot of we do the rest of the work, about 5%, is all speed oriented. So some sprint speeds, say 15 or 20 meters. So that lasts, say, between 6 and 10 seconds. And we do some 50 meter work, all based on swimming efficiency. So stroke counts, somewhere between 80 and 85% indication of effort, just to build that anaerobic capacity. So that's pretty much how our base work looks like. And once we get a little bit further in the season, I try to address that pace speed. So we have twice a week. So in the middle of the season, say 3 months out, we do twice a week. We have a pace set where I try to have them on 105s, 106 per 100, and for about 90 minutes. So they really are they have a long session where they are competition pace. And the rest of the work is all low aerobic work, because if I feel that if the intensity gets too high in the aerobic work, I really break them down and they lose their speed. So then in the final preparation towards the competition, I really try to bring the speed up to. I have a few race specific sets where I start out around competition speed, so the 104, 105, 106 range, and that builds all the way up to, usually it's an hour and a half set, 7K, 8K, and that builds towards maximum speed in the last 15 minutes. So they really build that aerobic power for the last part of the race. So that's pretty much how I built the season.
Well, that's a wonderful breakdown of what the season looks like and your coaching philosophy. A couple of follow-up questions. The first one is, when you say there in the first part, the early part of the season where you do 95% aerobic work, would that be what you call low aerobic, or would it be more middle to high aerobic work?
Well, I would classify that as low aerobic work. We work a lot with Jan Albrecht, the Belgian physiologist. He does a lot of lactate testing for our team, and we work according his training philosophy. And so I would, let me take a sip of water. If you
in the meantime, I'll tell the listeners that haven't been listening to the podcast for that long that Jan Olbrecht is a past guest of the podcast. So I'll link to that in the show notes for this episode.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, we work a lot with him. We had him here yesterday for some lactate testing. So it's always very interesting to talk and to speak with him and to discuss swimming. But anyways, most of my work is done around lactate 1.5. I think that is very basic work for him. My aim is that lactate 2 should be around his competition speed. So that's a very low lactate level, and I know that if he can do that, then they have a solid base, a huge base to really, then they cruise towards the first part of the race. So that's my aim. So most of the work is done around lactate 1, lactate 1.5. And if you translate that to swimming speeds, it's about between 113 and 116 of continuous pace per 100 meter.
Yeah. And since they're swimming 106, 105, 106 for the first 95 minutes of the race, I assume that that lactate 1 to 1.5 is something that they basically can hold for many hours of continuous swimming if needed. So
we have 3 hours in the morning in the early part of the season, and I bring them up to 12K. Because I think that they need to be 2.5 hours on that, they should be able to maintain that pace for 2.5 hours. In the past, I also had a 25 kilometer swimmer, and I've been up to 140 kilometers a week with him. And I think our main goal for him was to hold the 115s for 4 hours. So we really stretched that if necessary.
And when you do those base aerobic workouts and aerobic sets, what might that look like, just in terms of a little bit? How long are the repetitions that you're doing, and are you using a lot of tools as well, or is it mostly just basic swimming up and down the lane?
Yeah, that's good question. Usually we have a long session. We have 2 long sessions a week where they go, say, four times 2,500 meters. So it's, and with a 30 to 40 second rest, and there might be some breath control exercises in there. There might be some use of pedals in there, but all very easy work. And sometimes we do a 4 kilometer, a 3 kilometer, a 2 kilometer, and we use the feeding pole to halfway down the 4 kilometers to feed them, because it's an excellent opportunity for them to drink and to learn how to deal with that. We also sometimes swim in a pack, so we do 3 times 3 kilometers, and every 3 kilometers has a different pack setting. So they swim in a line or in a V shape or in a diamond shape, just to practice different things. So then we have 2 sessions a week, and we call that strength endurance. And I think it's a little bit misleading in the way of terminology, but I think that a big part of open water swimming is that if you swim in open water, it costs a little bit more energy than swimming in the pool. So I think the aerobic endurance, the strength part of things is really important. So twice a week we have, say, 400s with pedals, and then I have them wearing a t-shirt. So I just add a little bit of drag, not too much, just to do a little bit. They have to work a little bit harder, just to get a little bit more strength in that stroke, but not too much. But also quite long distances. So they do 400s to 800s, not as long as the long sessions where they do like 2,000 or 3,000, but more. That's up to 1,000 meters, and often that is alternated with the use of a propeller. The propeller is a device that is dragging behind you, and it rotates and it creates drag. And the faster you swim, the higher the drag, because it starts to rotate faster. So, and it really gives you a continuous drag during your stroke. So you have to really work hard to finish your stroke. But I do it at quite low intensities, also to stay. If you look at the physiology, I stay in that lactate 1.5 range, but I add a little bit. They need a little bit more strength in their stroke.
Yeah. And one of the key workouts you mentioned there was closer to the race, when you're doing the progressive swim, working up to finishing at a high intensity, basically race finish speed. Do you do, in addition to that, what sort of other high intensity training might you be doing? Do you have a later on in the season? You mentioned the sprints already, of course, but do you also do things like basically what we might call threshold work or VO2 max work, or those sorts of workouts, or is it all geared towards the specificity of the race, the way you describe it, with the long race pace workout and then the progressive one building up to race finishing speed as well?
Yeah, that's pretty much the most work we do. We do, in the second part of the season, we build up towards lactate 2, lactate 3. And we see that due to the huge volumes in the week, say 80, 85 kilometers, and if we put a little bit more intensity, they get quite easy in the part where you develop aerobic power, or they go quite quickly to their threshold. So their threshold will be around 2.5, 3 lactate. So they get there quite quickly. We do some work of that. Last week we did a 5/400s, starting at lactate 2, building up to lactate 4, and you see they get to heart rates of about 160 to 180. So that is definitely aerobic overload or aerobic endurance or threshold. But we don't do that too much. I think we more work with the contrast sets. So earlier this week, I had them doing 4/400s around lactate 1, going directly in 450s, where they had to go, say, 27 on a long course, count strokes, really efficient, fast swimming. So I really work on those two ends of the spectrum.
Yep. Okay. And you mentioned there that lactate testing you do, is that, can you describe a bit more how you do that? Is it a traditional sort of 7 or 8 step ramp test, 200 perhaps, or maybe, well, for your swimmers, maybe they're longer ramps. Do you do any other testing? Do you do sort of time trials in the pool, or any sort of efficiency testing, or using even devices that are now out on the market that you can do sorts of different technical testing and so on?
Yep. Yeah, we do some tests, but the lactate test, to start with, that is not the traditional step tests that most athletes use, because if you do a step test with the next step, you always take the effort of the previous repetition with you towards the next one. So the results are pretty much a combination of a lot of different factors. We work with Jan Olbrecht, and he has his test protocol is based on 4 individual swims. One is a 400 meters, one is a 200 meters, one is 150 meters, and one swim is 100 meters. Then we have an extra swim that's 100 max effort. So 5 swims in total. But his simulation is based on the first 4, and he has so much data that for each swim, he can after each swim you get your lactate tested 2 times, and he can with all the data he has in the model he has developed for each of those swims, he builds an individual lactate curve. And then he looks at the relation between the 4 curves, and that relation says something about the aerobic capacity and the anaerobic capacity. Then he has some other. He looks at some other parameters, and he can also say something then about the aerobic power and the anaerobic power. That is mostly done by using the maximum lactate in the 100 max. So it's not your traditional step test. It's really a very easy tests, because all the distances are done between lactate 2.5 and 6. So and after each distance, the swimmer gets out of the pool, gets its lactate taken, and then after a few minutes, he warms down between 2 and 400 meters, and then we go on to the next distance. So that's how we determine the lactate curve of the aerobic capacity and the anaerobic capacity of the athletes. Other testing that we do, we try to do it a lot really practical. So we do a lot of work with stroke counts. We do a lot of filming in the pool, and that we have some other. We do a few other things in the strength room, like jump testing and pull up testing. We have a weekly screening with our physiotherapist. He does the movement screens. And we keep it quite simple. Our idea is that whatever we test is we need to be able to use that to control or to direct our training process. For the pool swimmers, we do a lot more, but for the open water swimmers, we keep it quite simple. And my wish for the future is to start using the devices for stroke rate, stroke distance, and speed, and they are getting quite reliable at the moment. So I think that after this Olympics, we start using those.
Right. Yeah. And just to clarify for the listeners, you mentioned aerobic and anaerobic power, and that would basically mean the ability of the athlete to sustain a high percentage of their aerobic and anaerobic capacity, respectively. So that's the difference between power and capacity.
Yes, exactly.
To make that clear.
Yeah, exactly.
And you mentioned earlier that you want to have, so you work on the ranges of speed. So basically, you said that you want a high anaerobic capacity and a high aerobic capacity to be able to swim the first 95 minutes easy, and then still be able to really, really push when it matters in the last 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that is a fine balance, I guess, because you could also, with Jan Olbrecht's work, which I'm quite familiar with, he talks about the balance of how you can basically increase your aerobic power, for example, by decreasing your anaerobic capacity, but then that works a bit against your philosophy. So you really work, I guess, towards maximizing both of them. And can you talk a little bit more about how that balance works? Because that must be quite tricky, I imagine.
It is. Towards the 2016 Olympics, I worked with Ferry, and we had about 5 weeks out. We did our last lactate testing, and we measured him on a VO2 of 96 and a VLA, so the anaerobic capacity on 1.1, and those are extremely high values, extremely high for athletes, for swimmers. So, and that is definitely not something you want for an open water swimmer, because this swimmer is able to burn carbohydrate or glycogen at extremely high rate, aerobically as well as anaerobically. So that means you pretty much have as an athlete that during the race, he can turn if he can turn up, he can turn on the engine and really, really speed up. But he also, if he does that, he burns up a lot of energy. So the way to control that is we really hammered him down in the last 3 weeks with aerobic power work, just to get that VLA, that anaerobic capacity down. So one of our coaching philosophies is reversibility. And with that, I mean that everything that you build, you can also purposely break down. So we can build a really high capacity, but if it's too high, we can do a different type of training just to bring that anaerobic capacity down again a little bit. So, but once it's really low, at a really low value, it's really hard to develop. So that's why I'm also trying to really bring those capacities up, because it's easier to bring them down than to build them if they're really low at the ground and really low capacities. It's really hard to you have to be really careful and train really slowly, and then little by little you get those capacities rolling again. But if they're high, you can just hammer them down with really tough work. And there was also the period where we had to do 400 meters, and we did 400 meters start on 4:30, and he had to do 4:12, 4:13. in the long course. So that's really those are tough sets for him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense what you're saying there, that it's much easier to bring the capacities down than bring them up. And it reminds me of what we see in cycling. We have seen Olympic medalists on cycling track events go to road cycling and become Tour de France winners, for example. Yeah. But we don't see the other way around happening, and we won't see that either. So, and also what you mentioned there with having both the extremely high VO2 max and VLA max, there is something that is kind of another analogy to cycling would be the sprinters the best sprinters in the world would have to have both a very high aerobic capacity to be able to get to the last part of the race in the first place, but then also the high anaerobic capacity to be able to win the race and cross the finish line first. Whereas somebody who is a general classification contender who doesn't need to actually cross the finish line first in the sprint stages, but can be strong in the mountains and just go at their diesel engine all day. They don't necessarily need even that same aerobic capacity, because they can just have a high aerobic power, and they won't be using as much carbohydrate because their anaerobic capacity is so low. So that the balance depends on what you're training for. But it's really interesting to hear how you use that balance with the open water swimmers that are still training for an event that is almost 2 hours long.
Yeah, exactly.
A couple of other questions there. You mentioned doing some work in the gym, some testing there with jumping. Just generally, what sort of dryland training are you implementing in your program?
Quite easy. We think that for open water swimming, the pool time is the most important aspect of their training. So all other training forms are geared towards assisting, towards building their body and keeping their body fit so they can do the work in the pool. So I hope that makes a little bit sense. So it's our Dryland program is complementing our swimming program. So it should be geared towards injury. What is the word there?
Prevention. Injury prevention.
Exactly, injury prevention. We do because there's a lot of repetition, especially in the shoulder area, and you easily get injuries there. So we really try to work on stabilizing that shoulder in the drylands. The other part is that I think that the nature of the open water sport is there's a lot of contact happening during the race. So I think they need a huge core stability to maintain their position, because you don't want to have a soft core because somebody just comes alongside and pushes you away. You need to be able to maintain your position, and a good core stability will help you achieve that. So a lot of core stability. Also, our strength session is in the first part of the development of the athlete. It was more geared towards getting them a little bit stronger. But once we've achieved the level that we are happy with, it's much more geared towards a lot of complex issues where balance is the key factor. So, and in order to maintain that balance, once again, you need to activate your core a lot in order to complete the exercises. So that's pretty much the aim in our Dryland program.
Perfect. And would you mind giving maybe 2 or 3 examples of the core, just a couple of examples of core exercises that are used a lot in your program, and maybe a couple of shoulder stability exercises that are used a lot?
Yes, we do a lot of, especially for core, but also for shoulder. We do a lot on the red cord system. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
No.
The red cord system is a system where you it's red cords. You are basically suspended in air, and you can do all kinds of exercises there. So you have to use your balance a lot, but you can also incorporate a Swiss ball. You can do all kinds of movements. So where you have to stabilize your shoulder joints, but also stabilize your body. The other things that we do a lot is on maybe the Bosu ball. Do like squats with a ball, with throwing a ball. So you get a lot of instability around the ankles, and if you do the squat, maybe the one-legged squat, you have to keep your balance. And if you combine that with a throwing of a medicine ball, you get a little bit of a strength element in there. So really try to use those kind of exercises. Every morning we start on deck with some Dryland. And one session is more geared towards the fascia. So really keep the body smooth and long movements. We have a session that is geared towards shoulder stability. So we do a little bit of planking, but not so much, not long sessions, but in all kinds of planking with rotations, one-handed, on one arm or one leg, those kinds of exercises.
Right. Yeah, I looked up the red cord, and it looks kind of similar to TRX. So I think the general name of that type of training would be suspension training. So that's just for the listeners.
Yes,
that seems to be what it is.
Yeah, but the TRX is more of a. We use the TRX more as a handle where you do all kinds of exercise with, but the red cords goes up to. You can put up to, I think, 8 suspension points on the body, and the most the system that is the most complicated is is where you almost completely hang in the red cord system, and our physiotherapist really works on movement control, movement patterns. It's quite interesting, actually.
Yeah, I see some photos where a lot of different contact points and suspension with different cords. So yeah, it looks very interesting. All right, one more question. We already talked a little bit about the tools that you used in the pool. You mentioned using some paddles and some resistance devices, the propeller, and even t-shirts. What are some other tools that you might use, if any, that you think are good and useful? For example, are you using things like the snorkel, fins, etc.?
Oh yes, we use a lot of. We do a lot with the snorkel. However, I think that in the beginning of the season we use a lot of the snorkel, but in the middle and the second and the last part of the season, we also bring a lot of exercises for breathing patterns. So I want them to be able to breathe on both sides. And in open water swimmer, every 2 or 3 strokes, you lift your head in order to see where you are. And there's a lot of different methods how to do that. Because I see some athletes that really lift their head by pushing down their hand downwards. Well, if you do that, you lose a lot of propulsion. And of course, it's really easy to lift your head, but you lose a lot of swimming efficiency. So we try to incorporate that in the middle or the end of the season, because we found that if we don't do that, and they start to race, they really get tied in their upper body, the backside of their upper body, and we lose a lot of movement in that area. So they really stiffen up. So I use snorkels, but I'm also a little bit careful that I need them to be able to breathe on both sides. I use fins quite a bit for technical development, for kicking sets. Also, I use fins for swimming a little bit over speed. So it's really easy to do a lactate 1.5 set on higher speeds if you use fins, and so they get the neural patterns, the motor parents the motor parents patterns. I want to address that, so they swim easily at a 101 pace without putting too much effort in that. So that's why I use fins as well, especially in the middle part of the season. I use the what I quite like is the stretch cords. So I put them on the stretch cords for maybe 5 times 3 minutes. So that's, I think, another example of a strength endurance exercise. Of course, I mostly do that on a low intensity. And if I feel they get tired, worn down too much, I also do some swimming with the stretch cord, so assisted sprinting for 20-25 meters, just to get those motor patterns up again. And I want them to be able to swim fast at all times.
Yeah. Final question before we go into the rapid fire question. And this one is, the majority of the listeners of this podcast are age group triathletes. They might be swimming 3 or 4 times per week. Actually, 4 times per week would probably be a lot for the majority of the listeners. But anyway, let's assume that we have listeners that are swimming 3 to 4 times per week, and they're working towards, quite often it would be a half or a full Ironman. So 1900 meters or 3800 meters before they move on with the rest of the triathlon. With that sort of much more limited time to spend in the pool, in the water, do you have any pieces of advice that our listeners can take home and that might help them make their training in the pool more effective, or in the open water for that matter?
Yeah, work on your technique. I see a lot of triathletes with not so good swimming technique, and they use up so much energy at the beginning of their triathlon, and they need that energy for biking and running, and also use a lot. I would spend some time, if you have limited time swimming. Sorry, I lose myself there. I will use a lot of time on flexibility, shoulder stability, because we see that a lot of triathletes are really tight in the upper body because of the running and the biking. So they lose, they don't move so easily in the shoulders, and that takes up a lot of energy for them to get going. So I would put a lot of effort there. I think that's an easy method of getting better. So work on your technique, on your flexibility, your movability, and I think also their aerobic capacity is probably developed really good because of the running and the biking. So I would try to do some speed work in the water if you have limited time, because that's the easiest way to swim faster. If you do a little bit aerobic work, easy aerobic work, if you do some speed work and some technique work, you have a good balance to actually get faster.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And when it comes to the technique work, what I would probably suggest is to get a video analysis. I think is the best way to get started on improving your technique and actually be able to see what you're doing with all angles, with both above water and underwater footage, which is pretty easy to get with GoPros these days. Yeah, so that would be my recommendation. But do you have anything in particular that you want to mention when it comes to improving technique?
Yeah, the using of video is really, really easy, especially most of the phones. The new phones are also waterproof, so it's quite everybody can do a video analysis. I also think that especially now, there's a lot of coaches, swimming coaches, that probably have a bit more time, and try to get some personal coaching from a swimming coach. They can really help you, and also get have get a physiotherapist to look at your movement patterns in your shoulders. If you're really tight and confined there, he might have some exercises for you that really opens up your shoulder area, and that makes swimming so much more easier, because it should be smooth and easy. And that if you can start your triathlon in that way, you have a lot more to burn in the cycling and in the running part.
Yeah, great advice again. Now let's move into the rapid fire questions. So with these ones, just a short one sentence answer. And the first question is, what's your favorite book, blog, or resource related to swimming or endurance sports?
Jan Albrecht's book.
Science of Winning. We'll link to that.
Science of Winning.
And what's your favorite piece of gear or equipment?
Pedals.
And what's a personal habit that's helped you achieve success?
Determination. Never, ever, ever give up.
Perfect. Finally, are there any places where the listeners can follow you, perhaps social media? Or I don't think you have a website. I couldn't find one, but please let us know if there are any places where you can be followed.
They can always, if they have specific questions, they can always contact me. You have my contact info, so if they go through you, feel free to share my email address. It's marcel.wouda@knzb.nl. So feel free to join that, to share that. I am on Instagram and on Twitter, but not very active.
Okay, I'll put the email in the show notes, and that's very generous of you to give it out. So thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge with us. I've learned a ton. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure that the listeners will. So much appreciated. Thank you, Marcel.
Okay, thank you very much.
I hope that you enjoyed that interview. I really, really enjoyed talking to Marcel and found it a fascinating interview, and enjoyed hearing his perspectives on training. As always, you can find the show notes for this episode on scientifictriathlon.com, and I will link to related episodes there as well. On Thursday, we have another Q&A episode coming out as usual, so stay subscribed so you don't miss anything. And next Monday, I interview Coach Mark Pierce from the UK in a training talk format. So we get into all sorts of different topics relevant for triathlon or endurance training. But some examples that I found really interesting were periodization, interval training, and heat adaptation. And Mark has a background as the British triathlon Olympic team coach from two Olympics, and Olympic team physiologist for two Olympics. And then he also went to the London Olympics as a coach. So he has a long background in high performance sports, including those three Olympics. Definitely somebody that you should listen to, and come back next Monday for that. If you're looking for training plans or coaching services, you should check out scientifictriathlon.com. We have both ready-made training plans, customized plans, and individual coaching. So something for every budget and every set of objectives, depending on how ambitious you are. Go and read more about that, and send me an email if you have any questions and want to learn more about any of those products or services. Big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. Go and take their free online sweat test to get a personalized hydration strategy for your training and racing, and get 15% off your order with the promo code ThatTriathlonShow15. And thank you to Roka, that you can find on roka.com. Go and check out their wetsuits, tri-suits, swimskins, goggles, and high-performance eyewear, and get 20% off your order with the promo code that you can find on roka.com/TTS. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.